Good evening, all. Welcome to JB Boda Academy. Thank you to each and every one of you for your being here with us today. On behalf of Mr. Gautam Boda, our Group Vice Chairman, we are pleased to welcome our friends not only from India, but also from US, UK, Europe, Germany, Africa, Caribbean, UAE, South Asia, Singapore, and Philippines. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who have wholeheartedly rendered their support to initiate and execute this event. We couldn't have done it without you. With us today, we have our very own Dr. Shibani Belwalkar. I would like to take any more time in reintroducing Dr. Shibani Belwalkar. Most of you know her by now, and I would like to hand over this podium back to Shibani. Shibani, over to you.
Thank you so much, Aruna. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. And a very warm welcome to our discussion today on Unlearn and Learning, essentially the two completely relevant points for our post-COVID world as we're faced in a chaotic situation. Well, here's what we're going to do today in our discussion. We're going to talk about the relevance of unlearning, the essentials of unlearning, the pattern of unlearning, the methodology with the 20G framework, and of course, the transition from moving from unlearning to learning and understanding simple practices to make learning a very essential part of our daily existence. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. 50% of our battle that we win every day is in unlearning. The other 50% is in learning, particularly in a chaotic world. So let's get started, all of you. And yes, a very warm welcome. I love the messages that are coming through. I can see a lot of people that are logging on from different parts of the world, and it's amazing to see the kind of forum that J B Boda has created. Thank you very much indeed, J B Boda, for making me a part of your family. It's been a privilege and an honor to be with you across the series of webinars that you've created. Minimalistic corporate lifestyle is the key for all of us, and we will continue with that as we progress today itself. So let's get started. Here's a quick anecdote. There was a corporate company that hired a consulting company and gave them a brief. The brief was that we would like to see an animal with 4 legs, a tail, black in color, and can carry some weight. Well, okay, said the consulting firm, we know exactly what you want, and they presented the company with a buffalo. The company looked at the consultants and said, oh, you gave us a buffalo, we were looking for an elephant. Eventually, what arrived was a picture that looks just like this on your screen. The consultants decided to do a patch job and put on a trunk onto the buffalo and presented it. Classic example of what happens when we rely on our old patterns of thinking, our old mental models, and utilize those to solve problems of the newer world. The process of unlearning is very, very different and a very critical element that we need to see and incorporate if we wish to progress and solve newer challenges that present themselves. So, what is the meaning of unlearn? Let's begin with that. The process of letting go, first of all, getting rid of established knowledge is what the start of unlearn means. Unlearn essentially is a process where we determine what part of the information seems to be irrelevant to us, what questions can we ask, what themes can we challenge, what worldly views do we think can be reset, and then looking at how we can discard those. The way we discard excessive baggage is what we do when we discard or we unlearn old patterns of thought, old mental models. So in fact, here's what I can use as an example for all of us. A picture coming up on your screen right now shows the picture of an Earth when it was assumed to be flat. Imagine what would have happened had we not relied on what Pythagoras and Aristotle positioned with us, that the Earth is round, spherical. We would have continued to believe that the Earth is flat based on what the Egyptians had laid out. The minute we were able to embrace the idea of the Earth being spherical, we were able to progress. Now, embracing the idea of Earth being spherical along with the Earth being flat was obviously not possible because the two are incompatible. The minute we let go of one, we were able to walk the path of the other. And that's an example of what unlearning does. Well, why is unlearning so difficult? And let's look at some of the myths that surround unlearning particularly. First of all, it's about the investment of the time and the effort and sometimes emotions that we put in when we are learning a skill. Take an example of a multiplication table you would have learned as a child in your school. Imagine learning that across a number of years, and then suddenly when you're in college, you're taught a new method, maybe the Vedic method of math. You look at that and you struggle with it and you say, hey, nah, you know what I learned in my school seems to be doing very well. Let me just go back to that. Essentially, we have a comfort zone that we develop when we create certain patterns of information because it's what we believe is part of our existence, our knowledge, that comfort zone. We don't like to step outside of that. Also, there's a lot of emotion attached to that learning because we believe it defines who we are. It defines our wisdom as well. Of course, the amount of time we would have spent in learning that skill makes it difficult to let it go that easily, right? Overdose of information. There's so much of information coming our way from social media, from televisions, from friends, from chats, so on and so forth. All right. I can see something coming on screen. All right. From a lot of information coming to us from different kinds of sources. It's difficult very often for the brain to determine what amount of information is relevant and what is irrelevant. As a result of which, we just go on piling information on information, information on information on the basic original concept that we have built. Last but not the least, human beings are risk averse. So even if we see an area which we think we're not familiar with, we would rather step back and lean back into the information and knowledge we already possess and use the attribution theory, which means that you look at information and try to match it to your already learned concepts and say, I think I'm safe if I rely on this one particular idea or one particular theory. Now, all of these make unlearning extremely difficult. But in the words of Alvin Toffler, if we do not understand the mechanism of unlearning, we are going to be the illiterate people of the 21st century. So let's move on to understand what is the business case for learning. Of course, there are plenty kind examples in the whole world which determine what happened when individuals or corporates were not willing to let go of old mental models, old business models, and embrace the changing technology or even changing geopolitical situations. Steve Sassoon in 1975 was actually the first gentleman who invented the digital camera. He identified technology that went on to revolutionize the way photographs were taken. He used to work for Eastman Kodak. He found that technology, went up to his bosses in San Francisco and said, hey, you know what, look, this seems to be a revolution of sorts. The bosses looked at him and said, you know, we didn't want you to waste your time and energy on doing something like this. We have a very successful company running fairly well. Why would you want to discard that and try to jeopardize a success we've earned? So they reprimanded him for his energy and his time. And we know that the rest is history. Classic example of how Kodak demonstrated its inability to challenge its current core business models, scrutinize assumptions, or even just discard obsolete technology and practices. Another case in point, Reed Hastings was a CEO of Netflix in 2000. He offered the CEO of Blockbuster. Blockbuster was a VCR rental company in America which was ruling the roost at that point in time. When Netflix emerged, Reed Hastings gave a partnership offer to Blockbuster saying, let's work together in such a way that you can stream our live products and we will advertise for you. Of course, the headlines very clearly say that, you know what, it doesn't matter. You're never really going to succeed because nobody wants to watch live streaming of anything at all, leave alone forgetting to want to come and check out video cassettes. Again, resistance to let go of the old model, and most importantly, pride on the existing success that they had already achieved led to their downfall. Nokia, this is how it's been done here. We all know about what happened to Nokia, don't we? So if we are looking at business cases that essentially did not change with the changing environment, let's see what happened. All of these businesses were not able to get out of their comfort zone, were not able to let go of their inability to embrace changing circumstances whilst the environment in which they functioned was changing. So what we're saying is the world was moving. The environment in which businesses exist was moving from a simplistic to a complicated to a complex environment. These businesses, Netflix, Blockbuster, Netflix partnership deal, or even Eastman Kodak, or even Nokia, did not keep pace. Let me explain what we're meaning by these different environments in which businesses function and what these equations mean. We're talking about variables that function in an environment that allow us the ability to determine consequences, outcomes, or even the kind of results we would want to achieve. let me use a couple of examples of games we may have played in our childhood to discuss what may have been the pre-COVID environment we were functioning in first. So a quick question to all my friends. How many of you love the game of chess? And I'm opening up my chat box for just a minute. How many of you love to play chess? Can you quickly? Yes, you love playing chess. Okay, I can see a couple of answers there. Absolutely. As children, chess is supposed to be one of the greatest games you can learn in order to understand what strategy means. So here's an interesting analogy for us to look at. There are 32 pieces and a total of 64 squares in a game of chess. 2 moves into the game of chess and your chances of predicting who the winner is are 1 on 100. 10 moves into the game of chess and your chances go to predicting who the winner is. The probability is 1 out of 10,000. 15 or 16 moves into the game and it's probably a game that has never been played before. So whilst there's a certain amount of predictability of who's going to win the game, because the pawns that are used on the chessboard have a predetermined direction in which they move and a certain pattern in which they're allowed to move, it's difficult to immediately predict the results once the number of moves into the game increase. Not an impossible prediction, but a very complex, difficult, complicated one that will need a lot of permutation, combination, statistics, and so on and so forth. Not impossible, but really complicated. This was a pre-COVID world. Now let's look at what a post-COVID world may look like. Again, another quick question to all of you. Who loves to play carom? Now, a lot of us Indians have grown up playing carom. So for all my international friends logging on today, carom is a very critical portion of children growing up, especially those who live in large communities. So my mother, for example, was a great chess carom champion, and she taught me how to play carom board. So it's passed down in our family as well as an art. Yes, okay. Here's an analogy for us to consider with chess, with carom now. Carom has 18 coins, 14 coins lesser than the ones used on the chessboard. That means we're dealing with 14 fewer variables. But each time a striker decides to break the board, which is the way they start the game, each time a striker decides to break the board, there is no guarantee on the pattern that will emerge on the carom board with the coins that are spread across. So one can predict the result, the game, who's going to win or lose, or who's going to be the winner essentially, but we cannot predict the outcome of the pattern of the coins on the carom board, because no 2 strikes will give the same pattern. Now the post-COVID world is actually the combination of playing chess on a carom board blindfolded. Extremely complicated, extremely chaotic. There are very few variables we can match to create a predetermined predictable pattern. There are variables in the environment, some we don't know, some we don't even know we don't know. And how we're supposed to fuse these together to find an emergent solution is what chaos delivers. A little bit of a theory which can help us understand this even better. And it's a beautiful theory called the butterfly effect by Edward Lorenz. In fact, what Edward, I'm just going to minimize my screen here for a moment. The chat comments are rolling in and I'm delighted. Edward Lorenz was a meteorologist and a mathematician. He said that, you know what, the human mind believes that all the great events in the world are dependent on big activities. That means big impactful events are the ones that will make humanity shift or change. For example, wars, deviant politicians, population movement, migration, volcanoes, and so on and so forth. Most of us believe that this is what will trigger or change behavior or change or readjust our fulcrum as humanity. In fact, that's not the case. The smallest, most seemingly unmeaningful movements in the world create catastrophic changes. It's called the butterfly effect. Very ironically said that if a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian jungle, subsequently a storm ravages half of Europe. So the butterfly effect says that let's not underestimate smaller variables in the environment that can come together to create a really large change that can impact us in ways we can't even imagine. The butterfly effect is a fulcrum, the cornerstone of chaos. In the beautiful words of, thank you so much, in the beautiful words of Benjamin Franklin, For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. All for the want of a horseshoe nail. We can look at a few more examples of the butterfly effect really closer to home. Examples which I'm truly, truly privileged to share with all of us, very close to my heart as well. There are terrorist attacks all over the world. People are dying, but it took a 13-year-old girl who survived and shared her story with the world to make us wake up and accept reality and get rid of our old thought schools, old mental patterns and school of thought of education for girls across the world. There are activists who exist on environment and sustainability issues. But it took a young 14-year-old girl to stand up and refuse to go to school to make us get up and realize that we cannot be ignorant about the practices of sustainability anymore and our environment. A 10-year-old Scottish girl decided that she's not happy with the cafeteria food, and don't we all complain about cafeteria food? But it took a 10-year-old girl, a Scottish young girl, who challenged the school authorities, who challenged the county authorities to question why a particular kind of menu was being served in school, and eventually ended up changing the way all Scottish children receive cafeteria food once and for all. Seemingly small people, seemingly small changes, but have made us get up and recognize that yes, it's time for us to let go, discard the old, and embrace the new. Now, I'm going to take a quick pause and check with all of you over here. What have been any examples that you've come across where you've seen relatively minute changes making a large impact in your organization? And I'm opening the chat once again for a little while to see your answers. Where have you seen seemingly minute changes in your organizations that went on to actually roll out into huge impact? Some change in technology, absolutely. Some change in the way you determine, maybe one individual leaving from a particular team and going, maybe some particular market, for example, when we decided to ban the use of certain plastics, which seem to be relatively small, some other part of the world, but started impacting companies over here. Where have you seen examples happening? Okay, yes. So whistleblowing in corporates, absolutely, that's right. Technology, wonderful, okay. Keep them going. I can see, oh, all right, they're really, it's like an avalanche of comments. Thank you all so much. So this is what we're going to talk about, the whole butterfly effect and the need for unlearning as a process. We've established the fact that we do need to unlearn in the context of a chaotic world. So the business case is there. We know what it means. So why the hesitance in unlearning? Why the difficulty in unlearning? What gets in the way of us getting rid of redundant practices? Old school of thought, work from home, that's right. Old school of thought is not going to serve us in the new world that we're stepping into. So let's look at some of the challenges in letting go. I'm going to take you all through a little bit of a journey in understanding the process of letting go stepwise and what letting go really takes us into as a result of the outcome of letting go. What better way of explaining this than a little story? The model that you have on screen is a model by Otto Schammer, who's created a theory U, which determines how organizations and individuals can incorporate the process of letting go and move over the threshold of then relearning what they need to learn. So the unlearning mechanism, the relearning mechanism. I have a story which will beautifully elaborate this entire model. And I have a request, if you could stay with me and consider this particular screen for a couple of moments with a focus on what's written towards the left of your screen. Avoid the voice of judgment, avoid the voice of cynicism, and avoid the voice of fear. The story is of a young boy called Shwetketu. He was a son of the sage Udalaka. The sage, when the boy was young, sent him off to the Gurukul, saying that go and learn and come back as a learned person. Shwetketu went to his guru, spent several years learning everything that needed to be learned, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and all the other scriptures of great behavior. He came back to his father after 8-10 years, and he was delighted to come back home. The father, instead of embracing him with delight and joy, looked at him and said, "All right, Shwetketu, have you learned that which cannot be learned? Have you been taught that which cannot be taught? Have you learned what it is that it is difficult to learn?" Shwetketu looked at him very suspiciously and said, "What do you mean by that? I have learned everything that my gurus taught me." He says, "No, Shwetketu, you are not learned at all. You need to go back and learn what I told you." Shwetketu, one who was not to challenge his father, decided to forego his pride and go back to his guru, because now he was really curious that what is my father talking about, and what is this wisdom and knowledge by which I can truly become learned. So he goes back to his Gurukul and requests his guru that, "Guru, can you please now teach me that which cannot be taught and help me learn that which cannot be learned?" The guru smiles at him and says, "Oh, I see. Why didn't you tell me that earlier?" Shwetketu, of course, was very surprised and said, "I didn't know." He says, "Well," the guru tells him, "I can only help you learn all of this if you had asked me to." So the guru tells Shwetketu to take 100 cows that were grazing in the Gurukul and walk across to the other side of the mountain and remain with the mountains and the cows until the 100 cows automatically, by virtue of breeding, became 1,000. So he said, "Come back to me and the Gurukul when your 100 cows have become 1,000 cows. Shwetketu was again very curious, saying that this doesn't seem to make any sense. So he was very shifty about this particular instruction. But again, children were not supposed to question their gurus in those days. So he decided to take the chance. He grabs those cows and he walks across to the mountain to the other side, and he sits there for days together. He's grazing. He's sitting with them, actually looking at all those cows, not doing anything. Beyond a point in time, he decides to start reciting the Vedas. So he recites the Vedas, he recites all the Sanskrit shlokas, he starts talking to the cows, he's going back and relating to all the knowledge and wisdom that he's gained in all those years. The cows don't care. They continue grazing the way they are grazing, ignoring him completely. After the point in time, Shwetketu realized that there's no sense at talking to anyone here, no one's ever listened to me. So he became silent. Beyond a point in time, he realized that he was becoming so silent, he could hear the sound of his breath. Beyond a point in time, he became so silent that he didn't even realize when it was day and when it was night. Beyond a point in time, he did not even realize when days and nights had converted into months and into years. One fine day, there was a voice of one of the cows beside him, which basically nudging him to say, "We are now 1,000. We need to go back to the Gurukul." Shwetketu got up and accompanied the cows back to the Gurukul. And as he was walking into the Gurukul, the Guru saw a spurt of light around him. There was this shining brightness that came from Shwetketu. The Guru ran towards Shwetketu, welcoming him with open arms and saying, "I'm delighted that you are back." In fact, he bows to Shwetketu. Shwetketu looks at him and says, I'm back." And the Guru says, "Yes, I know. There are not just 1,000 cows, there are 1,001 cows." So it is said that Shwetketu, after spending so much of time with the cows, actually started resembling one of those cows. He saw no difference between himself and the other living beings around him. He had reached a stage of consciousness and awareness that was so unique and so heightened that he truly was an individual who realized what it is that meant to be a learned person. And from that moment onward, he went on to acquire wisdom and knowledge in the truest form. Now, with this story, I'm going to ask a couple of questions to see what you feel, what you think is a voice of judgment or the voice of cynicism with Shwetketu. Where do you think he was able to let go of that entire desire to want to prove his knowledge? When do you think, at what moment was he able to realize that truly I need to get rid of the cynicism before I can adapt and embrace the newer knowledge coming my way? So a quick question. All right, great. Yes, when he went to his guru. Okay, that's true. After returning. All right. Okay. Yes. So I'm going to park this question with you all. It's a beautiful story from the Advaita Veda. Please do go ahead and read the story. It enhances and determines what this theory you talks about. Now, Otto Schammer has highlighted, saying that when we finally let go, reach the stage where we're okay to be open to the embracing of newer knowledge, that's when we start crossing over the threshold of unlearning to learning. When teams, individuals, organizations can cross over this threshold of unlearning to learning, that is when they start functioning as an intentional vehicle for the emergent future. That is when there is a heightened sense of awareness and future possibility. That is where innovation happens, when we're okay to discard old mental patterns and look for the newer ones emerging. Well, 50% of the battle, of course, is in letting go, but there is a bigger battle on hand, which is a relearning. So I'm inviting you all now to cross over the threshold with me of unlearning and embrace the power of learning here. What you see right now is a small graph, which is called the power law of learning. It's difficult when we start a skill or start learning something new to stick to it. Quick question here. Have any one of you given up midway learning something new? Like you've decided to take on learning the guitar, learning some music, learning a new language, learning Excel skills, something that you've decided to start learning and midway you said, nah, it doesn't seem to be really working with me. It's too difficult. It's taking too much time and so on and so forth. You've just dropped it. Yes. Okay. Go ahead and in the chat box, put up what skills you've been trying to learn many times. Okay. I see that comment coming up. What kind of skills do you think you were trying to learn and you gave up midway? For me, for example, I tried my hands at playing the guitar. I succeeded a couple of times. The first few weeks I was really excited. And then later on I realized, okay, I saw my patience dwindling down. This was, of course, several years ago as a young teenager. French classes, cooking, that's right. Singing, okay, great. So now here's what. Our learning does not occur at a constant rate. So according to this, the exponential function shows that learning increases at a constant rate in relationship to what is left to be learned. That means if you know absolutely nothing about a topic, you will learn the first 50% really quickly. And then the rate at which you learn the leftover 50% is very slow. This is the power of learning. This is what happens because suddenly after the first probability of getting new knowledge acquired, we start losing our energy and our capacity to learn the leftover knowledge. But having said that, there are solutions to this. We have a 20G framework that we can offer to overcome this challenge, which is the difficulty of keeping the speed of learning up. We have 2G, 3G, 4G. We're offering a 20G framework, the 20R challenge for growth. Let's look at the simplistic framework that we have over here. Simple steps you can incorporate in your day-to-day life, going with the theme of minimalistic corporate lifestyle. These steps can be made a part of your regular routine and actually become a lifelong habit. Committing at least 20 hours is a first step. 20 hours don't seem really large, nor do they seem really tiny, but they're just enough for us to overcome the inhibition that we have or the resistance which we have to want to persist a particular skill. Learn enough about the core concepts to see something materialize out of it. Again, going back to the power law of learning, when you pick up a couple of big skills at the start of your learning process, it'll keep you going with your enthusiasm to realize what's in store at the future. For example, if you learn to play the guitar, you're enthusiastic about the first few songs you learn and you're playing them all the time. That's because you get a sense of achievement, small wins. And of course, breaking down the large goal into milestones that seem a lot more achievable for you to practice and to determine. Now, what is this 20-hour challenge about? What's the background to 20 hours and why 20? Research has said that when we determine 20 hours of a pre-commitment, what we do is that we start rescheduling our day to adjust those 20 hours in a way that we can contribute and practice the skill we want to learn. If we're not able to rearrange our schedule to accommodate those 20 hours, It's probably a skill we do not want to really acquire, and we should then focus our attention on skills that matter to us. Why are we saying that we need to make a serious pre-commitment? Because that becomes the line on sand influencing us to keep doing something again and again and not giving up when it seems seemingly difficult. Not just that, but the 20 hours by research have shown that it is just long enough for us to learn the great skills, but not so long enough for us to be overwhelmed by the whole challenge of learning. So the 20G framework can be a tool for us to start incorporating the process of learning any new skill or any new activity that we've set out for ourselves. Commit 20 hours, learn enough about the core concepts to see outcome, and break it down into smaller goals. And of course, there is one big element that we need to not ignore in the process of learning what learning is about. And that is the science behind the learning pattern, which is called cortical thickening. Here's an experiment I'd like to share with you. The University College of London decided to study how taxi drivers in the UK got their licenses and what happened as a result of the learning that they had to undergo. So the taxi drivers, before they get a license, are required to memorize the maps of the roads of the UK, of London primarily. It takes them 4 to 5 years to memorize those maps at any point in time. So the experiment that UCL conducted was that they looked at these taxi drivers who were applying for the licenses before they started memorizing the maps, put them through MRI scanners to see the size of the brain or the patterns that emerge as a result of learning or not learning. So they measured the size of the amygdala, which is a muscle memory in our brain. It's basically a muscle that is responsible for memory. So they mapped the size of the amygdala in the brain before they started memorizing the maps. And then 3-4 years later, they used those same taxi drivers as their for the experiment and put them through the MRI scanner again to see what was the development in the amygdala. There was clear thickening of the amygdala, which indicates a neural network that starts forming as a result of repeated practices. So the more we practice, the more we can learn. And that's what science tells us. So if we can overcome the 20-day challenge, if we can overcome the resistance of the first 20 hours and keep repeating the patterns of what we need to practice, we will suddenly realize that we're getting even more fluent with the skill that we're trying to learn. And of course, examples that can become business cases for the growth mindset. Growth mindset is a cornerstone of learning. So whilst unlearning is determined by the chaotic theory, is determined by the butterfly effect, has a process to be followed, the learning process also has steps to learning, but it also requires a nourishing of a mindset. All our faculties that will allow us to see things in a positive frame of mind. A great example is with what Airbnb did. So Brian Chesky, Joe, and Nathan, who set up Airbnb as a result of not getting rooms when they were visiting an art festival in 2007, changed the course of history, ask the right questions, challenge patterns, and see what happened. Or for your rooms, and everyone knows that story, don't we? About how he went on to create one of the most changing equations in the hotel industry. Both examples of growth mindset. Simple steps to a growth mindset that we can all formulate and utilize in our day-to-day lives. Step number 1, look at any 5 thoughts or beliefs that you believe are holding you back, limiting your true potential. There are so many, honestly. But let's look at the top 5 ones that we genuinely think are limiting us from doing what we'd like to do. Look at 5 activities that are not productive, but we keep repeating as well. Some task maybe you think is actually redundant, but you seem to be doing it every day and not asking the right questions. If you map your daily tasks and your daily routines, either as a professional or even in your personal life, you will come across so many things that do not deserve to have a place in the bandwidth of your time or your existence. Map those. And of course, re-educate yourself on those activities and see what you're doing now with the new knowledge you're acquiring in place of that or in lieu of that. Take the 21-day challenge after that. Take the 20-day simple challenge after that and see what happens. If you're able to incorporate these simple steps, you will start nurturing a growth mindset. The benefits of growth mindset are many. And here's one example of what happens to an organization as a result of the growth mindset. It's not just about sharing of information, but it goes all the way to how people start recognizing each other as well, just by incorporating the process of having a growth mindset, giving up the process of sticking on to old practices and old mental models and old business strategies and incorporating newer and newer ways. Organizations start shifting. They start elevating from one level of being extremely incongruent with the current circumstances, like we looked at the examples of Blockbuster and of Eastman Kodak, but move on to be a lot more progressive in terms of their nature and existence. The environment we're in today, the world of chaos, will not permit us to continue to hold on to the process of our existing patterns. And on this note, I'm going to start summarizing what we've done throughout the entire session we've been together. The process begins with first determining what unlearn means. The ability to realize that unlearn is not something that is very vague or can be done only when you need to do, but the process that one needs to make a regular habit. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. What worked 5 years ago is definitely not going to work 10 years from now. What worked in the pre-COVID world is clearly not working in the post-COVID world. We've looked at so many examples as well. See what happened when we let go of the idea of the earth being flat and embrace the idea of the earth being spherical. Look what happened to companies who chose not to accept or acknowledge the fact that the environment was changing. Eastman Kodak and Blockbuster, Nokia, and there are many examples around us that tell us that. Let's acknowledge the fact that learning to unlearn is a prerequisite to learn as well. Why? Because we are in a current situation which is only chaotic. Whilst pre-COVID may have been a journey between complicated and complex and back again, we're currently oscillating between complicated, complex, and chaotic. We don't even know in which direction we're currently moving in. In such a situation, making sense of the variables around us is difficult. And if that is the necessity or that is the condition that we're operating in, the environment in which we exist, then it is absolutely critical for us to first unlearn what we did pre-COVID and move on to the journey, cross over the threshold for learning. We looked at great cases of a chaotic environment, giving you great examples and great outcomes, such as Malala Yousafzai, a young girl from Sweden, Martha Thunberg, or even when we looked at Martha Payne, who's a Swedish girl who changed, a Scottish girl who changed the way cafeteria food was delivered to kids in Scotland. With these examples, we've seen that the butterfly effect does exist. Chaotic world exists, and there are examples that show what happens as a result of that. We moved on to see the process. What do we need to do to unlearn? Shwetketu gave up the voice of cynicism, judgment, and fear before he could accept the fact that he truly wanted to be learned and a wise man. Once we move across the threshold, we move into the phase of learning. Simple steps to learn. Decide what doesn't work for you anymore. Replace those with newer things and start practicing. Take the 20G, 20-day growth challenge. Break down small tasks. Keep milestones for yourself. Look at smaller wins. And most importantly, realize that you have to make time during your day to incorporate those 20 hours to make it more meaningful to you. Great benefits of creating an unlearn to a learn mechanism in our organizations. You can actually move from an organization that is going to be redundant to an organization that's going to be progressive and innovative. That movement and elevation happens as a result of this. And on that note, I'm going to conclude with a very popular Sanskrit shloka. Having grown up in a country far away, it becomes necessary as I mentioned earlier as well. Let me just get that slide up for you all to say, for all my colleagues who've joined us from different parts of the world, here is a Sanskrit shloka I'd like to share with you, and the meaning is also on screen in English. Na choharyam na cha rajaharyam, na bhratrubhajyam na cha bharakari, vyaye krute vardate evam nityam, vidyadanam sarvadanam pradhanam. It actually means that knowledge cannot be stolen by a thief, it cannot be snatched by kings, cannot be distributed amongst brothers. It's neither heavy, but the more you expend it, the more it's going to grow. The wealth of knowledge is the supreme wealth of all. So the ability to keep learning is the greatest gift that you can give yourself, but it begins with unlearning. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Aruna again. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I've had a great honor and privilege and happiness in going through this journey with you, through our storytelling, through our examples, and of course, your fantastic participation as usual. I'm open for any questions that maybe Aruna would like to moderate and share with me. Over to you, Aruna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shibani. This is one of the things that I was listening to you. What is this 21-day myth about learning is there? If you would like to address that.
All right, great. So the 21-day challenge was actually brought out by a researcher called Maxwell. And 21 days are the minimum number of days that somebody needs to work at in order to get something to become a habit. Now, interestingly, what's happened is it's been distorted in such a way that a lot of people believe that by 21 days of practice, you can make something a habit. 21 is a minimum number of days that a brain takes to create that neural pattern that will stick and becomes muscle memory. We have suggested the 20G model primarily to be just using those number of hours first in order to get over that threshold and get into the phase where practice becomes regular and regular. So the 21G myth, of course, is actually just a myth. It's a minimum number of days that Maxwell has suggested we need to practice before something becomes a habit. It can go from 21 days to 400 days, in fact. Try the 20G model first and see how that works. The 20R challenge, that's a far easier and minute, more descriptive way of realizing that you can make the skill stick with you.
Thank you so much. What do you think in the post-COVID world, how the people who are into changing their learning habits, how fast they will adapt to those environments, or they will be still challenged in those environments?
Sorry, your voice, I lost your voice in a while, Aruna. Can you repeat that?
Okay. Is it clear now?
Yes.
I said in the post-COVID world, the people who would like to change their, or who would like to unlearn and relearn. So how fast they can catch up with the pace, or they will still struggle given the environment or the infrastructure or the framework that is provided to them?
All right. Interesting question. Well, here's my my view on this, and I think maybe you could consider this. Learning very often is determined by the learner himself. So despite there being a conducive environment to learn, what happens is we have a tendency of resisting to want to learn, primarily because we're in a comfort zone of the knowledge we've acquired. In the post-COVID world, even if organizations do not choose to change the circumstances they're in, encouraging people to learn, the individual himself or herself has already realized that there is no survival without that learning happening or the unlearning happening. So it makes sense for individuals and employees themselves to first embrace the reality of today's world. For example, we never realized that not meeting each other can be a way of eventually surviving. That is, we can survive without meeting people. We're a social race. We're a race that is always used to being together. We're a very collective set of people. We believe in family and ties. The Eastern world is known for that. We've survived for over 2.5 months without interacting with people. It was something new to us. But automatically, by learning that pattern, unlearning the fact that we cannot survive without meeting each other physically, we've already started changing the patterns of our behavior. So whilst post-COVID has set the ball running, I think the realization has dawned on most individuals that getting rid of old patterns is a non-negotiable. So the unlearning and learning, even though they're paradoxical, have come together to become partners post-COVID. There is no option. It is survival of the fittest and the literate, as Alvin Toffler has said. And if we're not going to unlearn, we will not survive.
Thank you, Shibani. One last question from my side. This is a very personal question. Sure. You are a faculty at NMIMS and you are interacting with a lot of newbies in the B school. You're interacting with a lot of HR fraternities because you are doing lectures with them. what is the 2 or 3 major key things that HRs are more looking forward for a change that should happen in the COVID world?
All right, interesting question. And of course, it has a lot of angularities to it. But the first thought that comes to my mind about the post-COVID world and HR fraternity, which I think is going to have a huge role to play, is the development of empathy and compassion. Post-COVID, the only 2 attributes that are going to matter so much to everybody who exists in the organization is the demonstration that we care, is a demonstration that humanity comes above everything else. Look at the world, it's come to a standstill literally. And everybody or anybody who can contribute to making sure we can mitigate the risk and the crisis that we're in, this is the biggest crisis since World War II, has put in their time, money, and effort into that. So one large element which HR teams will have to start focusing on is building cultures of compassion and empathy. Unless those cornerstones exist, organizations will not be able to survive, particularly because that's the only thing that is going to keep humanity going. It's the only thing that's kept us going also across the last few years. So yes, that's, I believe the biggest element is going to be creating a culture of compassion and empathy.
Great. Thank you for this.
So I have one quick request. My colleague is going to paste a link onto the chat group right now. And this is a request for all of you to go into that survey and answer that survey, because it's a question about what do you believe are some of the critical skills which leaders are going to have to incorporate and learn in the post-COVID world. What skills do you believe are absolutely critical to incorporate and learn as soon as we mitigate the risk that we're in? So if you could go onto the link and give us your answers, it'll be lovely. As always, Aruna, it's been a pleasure to be here with the J B Boda Academy. It's a topic that's very close to my heart because learning never stops. In fact, learning will go on till the day we decide that it's time to leave. And learning is as good as the heart that beats within us.
That completely resonates with J B Boda. At J B Boda also our management team and we all together, it's in our culture that we believe that knowledge is something that we need to share and we should not limit ourselves. So that's why one of the aspect on the webinar, we made it one basis thing that this will be available for everyone. We have kept our invitations open for anyone and everyone to log in and listen to our webinar series. So we don't want to limit ourselves by saying this is our IP and this is our secret webinar, please don't log in. So we are not limiting anyone. So that's why you see we have participants wide across from India, outside India, everybody is welcome. So now this link that you've posted over here, Shibani, would you be posting the answers right now or will you be giving it later?
No, we will share the responses at a later point in time when you share the video as well and the presentation. I've received some requests on my chat requesting for the presentation as well. I'll be happy to share that with all of you. Fewer concepts, do look up Theory U by Otto Schammer. Also look up the story of Shwet Ketu and make the most of your time at home during this COVID world to unlearn first and relearn.
Okay.
I liked what you said, Aruna. I think it's amazing, and you used a very interesting word. You said, we have nothing secretive about the webinar and the series that we're doing. You're right. The saying that I have put up here, the Sanskrit saying, actually says that the greatest wealth you can acquire is when you expend knowledge. And believe you me, the more you're able to share knowledge, the more it's going to grow as well.
That's true. That's true. Thank you so much, Shibani. And I'm personally, I'm very thankful to you because I know today's session is a 2 days workshop that you do, and you have actually crunched it for an hour for our audience because we have a time paucity. Thank you so much. But today, apparently, it's very fortunate that you did not take an hour. It was wrapped up within 45 minutes, and thank you so much because you've made it so easy for people to understand the concept, how to unlearn and relearn. And I'm sure our audience are going to benefit out of this. On this note, I would like to convey my thanks to you as well as to our audience who are very gracious to see our webinar series and being appreciated for our webinars that motivate us to bring in more series like this. So this is the first series of Minimalist Corporate Lifestyle. We are looking forward to launch more series in time to come. We are planning that. We are into a conceptualization stage right now, and we'll come back to you with more information. But please stay tuned with us for tomorrow, 9th of May, to listen to Mr. Ashish Kumar, who will give us insight on mindfulness. And I'm sure, like today's and the past webinars, you will definitely like the tomorrow's. Stay with us till 10th of May, which is the last finale lecture that Dr. Shibani would be doing on leadership. Please pass on the word to all the leaders, whoever you're interacting, to watch the session. It will be a great learning for all the leaders or the leaders that are aspiring to become the leaders. I would like to state thanks to Shibani, and I would like to circle back to Shibani for closing comments. Your closing comments on this.
Thank you so much. I'm just reading through some of the comments that are coming my way, and I'm honored and privileged. Here's something I thought I would share with all of you. I don't know if the screen's going to show. I live in a place where there's a lot of bright sunlight, and this is a book on Don Quixote, Cervantes. So it's one book which I recommend everybody read. It's a book about a young man who decided to pretend to be a knight in shining armor, and eventually realized that all the stories he was making up seemed to be stories that were stories of imagination. But his imagination was actually his reality. And this is a great book that teaches us the importance of being able to imagine, the importance of being able to let go, and the importance of realizing that sometimes when we look at madness is actually a desire to change the world. So my recommendation is this book. It's called Don Quixote. And on that note, good evening and good afternoon or good night, whichever part of the world you're in. And I hope to see you once again on our session on leadership, our finale about the journey we've taken all across on developing mindsets, looking at the way we can create skills, we unlearn, we look at talent, and eventually put it all together to become leaders of the 22nd century. Goodbye, and thank you so much. Thank you, Aruna.
Thank you.